This is What If I Told You, the event psychology video podcast for event professionals in which Victoria Mady, event consultant and host, talks with the world's top minds in behavioral science, neuroscience, and psychology on how to transform events using insights about human behavior and mind. For more science-based tips, join Event Psychology Club at eventpsychology.gumroad.com. Also, check out Victoria's online course, Event Psychology Lab, at eventpsychology.thinkific.com, which covers key behavioral science concepts and offers research-backed solutions to your event challenges. This course is a unique opportunity to upgrade your industry skills and gain a competitive edge without adding to your already busy schedule. Now, enjoy the conversation.
Hello, I'm Victoria Mady, and this is What If I Told You, the Event Psychology podcast, where I talk all things event psychology, that is how to apply brain science insights in events. Today, my guest is Diana Lucaci, co-founder of True Impact, offering concept testing and conversion rate optimization to brands and agencies. She is a board member of the Canadian Research Insights Council and committee member of the Standards Council of Canada. Diana advises mid-large organizations including Canada Post, General Motors, Costco, and others. She holds a degree in neuroscience and psychology from the University of Toronto. Welcome, Diana. Thanks for coming. I found Diana on LinkedIn a long time ago when I first read about the Canada Post research. And I hope we will discuss it too. But I think that this is the first time I'm mentioning the term neuromarketing in this podcast, and I wanted to start just with that. So what is neuromarketing?
Simply put, neuromarketing refers to the combination of neuroscience to marketing. So you take neuroscience insights and information that we have known for, the last 100 years, and we apply that to the way we do business and the way we send communications to people. Essentially, the point of neuromarketing is to make sure that whatever content or marketing is being put out there, any message should be eye-grabbing, should be easy to understand, should be persuasive, and should not confuse the customer, and it should not clutter up the space, right? The marketing space. So that's what it's all about. It's about optimizing that ad so that brands save on cost, agencies are able to stand out better, and the customer feels like they can quickly understand what is being communicated.
How did you start working in this field?
I started about 10 years ago, back in 2012. My education is in neuroscience and psychology. I studied at the University of Toronto. I then worked in marketing for about 8 years and then launched what was at the time Canada's first neuromarketing company by combining essentially my education with my professional experience. And it was part experiment, part curiosity, but essentially we have evolved to really follow market demand and changed a lot in the last 10 years along the way.
I started focusing on event psychology, I think back in 2017, and until this day, there are so many businesses, including those, working in events, with little understanding of human psychology, little understanding of how such knowledge can benefit them. And when I watched your TED Talk, I think from 2016, you also say that businesses have little understanding of psychology and what goes on behind decision-making. So my question is this. What do you see now in terms of adoption of the neuromarketing approach by businesses?
I think the conversation has evolved a little bit since 2012 or, around that time. I think there's a lot more knowledge and the conversation is a little bit more educated. What we know about decision-making is that you first need to. So when you think about the way people make decisions, you start with information processing, which is kind of your sensory capture, where it's what you see, it's what you hear, it's what you touch, like all these senses give you information about the external world. Then you make a judgment for relevance. Like your brain just kind of quickly and automatically decides, keep or discard, right? And this happens in half a second. And that's step 2. And then the logical component, that logical analysis of, do I need to do anything with this information? Do I need to act? And then finally you have behavior. So what we see now is that part of that decision process, half of it is non-conscious. Half of it happens in a way that people cannot verbally explain or rationalize or control. It's automatic. It's very fast. And we're not talking 10% of this. We're talking half of it is non-conscious. So brands really understand that if they just look at the behavior in the market, if they just basically look at how many units are sold, who clicked on what, that is at the end of that decision making. If you want to understand the way your customer is making decisions, the thinking has moved upstream now. So it's less, it's not only about what actions were performed, but it's about, does the offer make sense to people? And do we have established trust in advance, right, with our customers, right? Because no matter how logical and, factual the offer is, if a customer doesn't trust the brand, which is an emotion, a purchase won't happen, right? So there is that sort of understanding around decision-making, and many brands are employing different types of tools depending on their timeline and on their budgets to understand that component of decision-making, because they don't want to get ahead of it. They want to differentiate themselves in the marketplace. They want to gain an advantage. And in the marketplace, a 2%, 5% advantage can mean can make a big difference.
Right. Can we talk about trust? I think this is something that comes up regularly now, and we do see how people's attitudes changed already, right? And establishing trust is an important step for the brands, for the businesses. And I guess my question is, what are the critical steps in establishing trust? And if you have any examples from events or related to events, I would love to hear that as well.
Right. The simplest way I can explain it, the way you establish trust with your audience, is you have to be authentic to yourself. So your voice has to feel authentic to the other side. If someone else can sense that you're being fake, if they can sense that you're not really being yourself, that trust cannot not really happen. So authenticity is number one. Second, what you say and what you do needs to come from a place of knowledge. So people have to look at that and think, wow, okay, they know what they're talking about. Like, that information is accurate. So they need to feel that you do know what you're talking about, which is, one component of it. Some people think that trust is based entirely on that, but that's not exactly true. You need to be true to yourself. You have to have an authentic voice, and you have to know what you're talking about. And finally, you have to act in your customer's best interest, right? So that customer, that audience needs to feel that you have their best interest at heart and that you think about what's best for them, right? And as soon as that feeling is established, which is not quantifiable, this is something that, people kind of judge from one human to another within the first 30 seconds of talking to somebody, right? If I can feel like, yeah, you do have my best interest at heart, you do want to act in a way that's going to benefit me, you know what you're talking about. And finally, I can see that you're being yourself, you're not faking something. Those are the kind of components that, get you to that level of trust with somebody. And then, obviously you need the maintenance, the consistency in behavior, which is more important than always being perfect. So as a brand, it's very important that you own up and you realize that if you slip somewhere, if you made a mistake, you own that and you kind of admit to it. And it's about how quickly or how well can you get over that and resolve it, right? So that is the sort of thing that can then build loyalty in time. And when it comes to event professionals and event marketers and so on, I would say, one of the main skills of this type of professional is that they interact with people. right? So you read body language really well. You have a lot of skills that other people may not have. You have interpersonal skills. You have patience for people to answer many, many questions. You have an eye for detail. So look at your strengths, and then your ability to connect with people means that you are more likely to be able to put yourself in their shoes. So use that empathy, right? When you go about building an event, use that empathy and really put yourself in the shoes of the attendee from the very beginning, when they first get that email invite, to the conversion point, to if it's an in-person event, think about what are they going to see, touch, taste, hear. Like, think about the senses, right? Are the badges really scratchy and annoying? Is the font on the agenda really small to read, right? Is it trying to say too much on a single page? Is the event app buggy and crashing? All these things are technical, but the other component is the human that I'm trying to underscore here. So from a neuroscience perspective, you want to think about removing any friction points and making it pleasant for human beings to interact, to exist in that space, right? So feed them on time, make sure the food is good, make sure that there are no unpleasant scents in the air, make sure there's enough water and coffee. Like, these are things that the temperature has to be right. So creating an environment for humans from a biological sense is the first kind of important consideration. And that is where I think event professionals can really, really shine, because you already come pre-built with a tolerance for people.
Those are, I love those examples. They're just great. And I think in my conversations with behavioral science professionals and neuroscientists, this is this theme, this topic of coming back to basics and learning more about how senses works, how it's all playing out on a brain level. It keeps coming up, because I think we need to reiterate it once and again, that learning more about senses and learning more about small details that can make a big, big difference is what will help transform events and make them better for everyone involved. So thank you for those examples. Those are great. And I wanted to come back to the scientific side of the things and ask you about the process of neuromarketing research.
Neuromarketing is a very broad umbrella term. The process depends on the methodology. If I can break down the whole idea of neuromarketing, I would kind of put it in a couple of different, like, one bucket would be brain measurement and neuroscience. And there's many methodologies and processes for that. And then there are biometrics, and there are many options there and processes for that. And then there's others. And those are very different as well. So essentially, depending on the methodology you use, you're going to have a different process or kind of how you go about conducting the study. But from, generally speaking, what the data is telling you is that gut feeling, quick reaction that somebody has. And that information is good to know in the beginning. So if you're going to want to, let's say if you're planning to do a study, the neuromarketing component should be the first, because you want to capture that first impression that people have to the email that you're sending out, to whatever thing you're testing. So the process is usually that neuromarketing research kind of starts, and then you do another form of research like qualitative, where you ask questions and you conduct an interview with people. And then you might maybe want to send them a quick survey, maybe. And then really the skill is not in doing one thing correctly, right? There's only so many ways of measuring the brain and analyzing that data. That's not the mystery. The real skill is in connecting these dots, right? So when you think about, like, I want to learn about this audience and I want to know more about them, you want to start with what gets their attention, what triggers their emotion, what gets embedded into memory, what do they say, what do they do? So when you are able to connect those data points into one cohesive story that you can explain to a 5-year-old in 10 seconds, right? That's when you really know you got it and you have a good grasp on your customer. So neuroscience, neuromarketing really sits within a broader understanding of an audience in that way.
But I can see some event planners may think, well, that's not for me. I'm a small business or I'm a freelance, I don't have the capacity to perform, or, use findings from the eye tracking research. So what would you say? Is neuromarketing for every business, or what event professionals can start with?
I think it definitely is, especially nowadays. There are solutions that are very low cost for a couple of $100. So what I would start with is understanding that first point that I mentioned is what gets attention. If you only have a little bit of time and a little bit of budget, the first thing you can optimize is getting people's attention. And that is, you cannot then get them to click on your ad if they don't see it, right? So it's the first step in any sort of marketing challenge is be seen, be perceived as relevant, and then be selected. So the way you understand if you grab attention is you can use eye tracking, for example, which can cost maybe $20,000 or more. However, there is an alternative called a predictive eye tracking methodology, where, in our case, our product is called TrueScan, for example. And with this sort of predictive eye tracking tool, you're essentially taking, you're using AI, neuroscience, and computer vision to predict where attention is going to go with about 90% accuracy. And that tells the event marketer if, hey, are people noticing my call to action, right? Are they looking where I want them to look? That's the first question. Are they understanding the information quickly and easily? So TrueScan can talk about that. And, finally, is that good? Is that bad? Do I need to make any changes? And what are the quick changes that can be implemented so that instead of everybody looking at the picture of a model, I want them looking at my main message, for example. And how do I make that change so that within half a second, people see the message, which is come to my event or whatever you'd like it to be. So those quick changes, this is essentially what we have in terms of a quick and easy option to neuromarketing. A tool like TrueScan tells you where people look. So what? Is that good? Is that bad? And then now what? What do you do next with that information? What can you change so that you optimize the communication that is going out? And the benefit essentially is, let's say you're at the concept stage and you want to send some emails out about your event, but then you're going to track how many people click in that email and then go to the website, right? So you would use a different tool for your click tracking, right? And that is behavioral data. But what we're talking about is before you actually go and program the email design, like when you're at the design stage, not at the programming stage, or even worse, don't send it out yet. Test it at the design stage and optimize it, right? So that's something that event managers can do, for example, when they send out communications. And the same thing can be applied for websites, right? You have a website that is trying to invite a certain audience. You want to know what's going to be most relevant above the fold. And then as people scroll down, what do they look at and what can they understand? And optimize for that. And when I say optimize, it means make it easy to understand, make it appealing, right? Remove any friction or any points of confusion and track, ultimately. Track to see, because marketing is like a real life experiment, right? Like you don't have a lab environment. You just kind of have to do it, put it out there, and then like see what happens. So using something like TrueScan just kind of helps take some of the risk out of it in the early stages, right? Before you put something out there and build a whole site around it.
I assume you attend many events and you speak at many events. So what do you think is the common mistake that the organizers make from a brain science perspective?
Yes, I have been speaking at many events over the last decade. One of the main challenges with being a speaker is that you are asked to join different groups of people in different associations, right? So sometimes I'll join a group that is in one industry, and then next month I'm going to meet with another group from a completely different industry and part of the globe, right? So you feel like you are traveling between these associations, but you don't really belong. And so one thing that organizers can do is to make sure that they use the speaker as an asset, right? So I want to make sure I'm adding value. Everybody who, if they agree to come to the event and speak, they want to do their best, right? Otherwise they would not agree to come. So, but use them as an asset. They're a brand ambassador, right, for the event. So if they're having a good time, guess what? Other people are going to gravitate around that, and they're going to socialize that, and they're going to talk about it. So don't forget to feed your speakers. Don't forget to include them in events and mix people up so that it doesn't feel like these are our speakers and now we are the cool kids, right? Or we are the cliques that form. You want to make sure you break that up a little bit whenever possible, and have seating charts for dinner, have seating charts for where people sit during the day, maybe name charts, right? If you're doing round tables, and you switch up so that there's a diversity of people seated in the same group. Otherwise, they're going to hang out with their colleagues, right? And this is kind of human nature, which will happen anyway, even if you do all these things. But these are just a few things that can help mitigate that. And the other thing is thinking about the experience, not just of the speaker, but all the attendees, right? In terms of, is it easy to find this location? Does everybody have transportation, right? If events or activities are going to hopefully activities are going to take place outside of the sessions, and not just dinner, but maybe go out somewhere, maybe go to see, if you're in a city, for example. Recently I was in Indianapolis, and we went to an Indy car factory to learn how an Indy car is made. So it doesn't have to be in the same theme with the event. It would be nice if it wasn't, because that gets tiring, right? And so get out of that space, which is the, boardroom space with tables and chairs, but get people out where they're standing, mingling, having a drink and talking, and essentially just learning about something else, so that people get a break, like a mental break, right? And then that's really where relationships are forged, is over a shared activity that is interesting, if that makes sense.
That's great. That's great advice. Thank you. Another question. There is a lot of debate in the event community regarding hybrid events. Shall we do online and live parts apart? What is the best way to engage both audiences? How do we make it memorable given the complexity of two-in-one production? What is your take on hybrid events from the neuroscience perspective? I mean, can physical and digital work together well?
Absolutely. You want to start with understanding your audience. And so if the group of people that you're attracting is, let's say they're mid-level managers from brands of a particular size. So you really know who you're targeting and who you're talking to. Try to develop a profile as much as possible. And I know this is stereotyping, but just sort of use it as a guidance, right? In terms of what percentage of these people are maybe more introverted and they prefer to learn separately from the group and join for short periods of time and then go back to recharge. What percentage of this group is extroverted and needs that face-to-face in order for them to interact or form a memory that they were even there? Otherwise, it won't even be on their radar, right? So understanding that and understanding that certain types of personalities are going to choose certain types of in-person or virtual. Now, you want these worlds to communicate. And so if there's a networking opportunity, incentivizing or making it fun for people who are online to get a chance to meet and chat with people who are at the event. You know what I mean? Like connecting those worlds so that it feels like they are there without having to be there. Maybe they're unable to be there. The other thing, I would make it really easy for people to pose questions, and either anonymously, or if there's one point of contact, or, some people are comfortable asking a question in front of an audience at the end of a Q&A after I finish a presentation. Some people won't, and they'll approach me afterwards one-on-one, right? So just creating that opportunity for every type of personality to interact. And that starts with human understanding. That starts with understanding of what motivates the attendees to come here. Somebody's sent there by their boss and they don't want to be there. Somebody had begged to go to the event and they had to really justify it, right? So they want to come back. Everybody has the will to kind of get something out of it. I think, I was going to say our job, but your job as event managers is essentially to understand what is that motivation that everybody's coming with. And between the physical and the digital space, beside the technology working well, this is a given, obviously, that needs to be figured out. The human component, feeling like I got a chance to maybe FaceTime with somebody who was at the event and they just did a quick kind of pan and showed me like, here's what's up, this is what we're doing, quick introduction, and that way you can kind of combine the two and make sure that people continue staying in touch. Sort of like a matchmaking, activity of sorts.
That's great. On that note, talking about physical and digital, can you describe the research that you did with Canada Post? I remember when I first read about it, I was amazed. And so what happens in people's minds when they receive a postcard versus a digital card?
Yeah. Canada Post is one of our longest standing customers. We've been working with them for about 7-8 years now. We've done a few pieces of research with them. Essentially, that particular study aimed at understanding how the brain reacts to physical media compared to digital media. And there's a follow-up to that study as well about the sequencing of physical and digital and how you want to do that properly or better to optimize that conversion rate. When somebody receives a piece of direct mail, a few things happen. There's the intent of the marketer, and then there's the receiver, right? So it takes one person to say it and the other person to hear it. And those two realities can be completely different, right? So the person sending it, the marketer, wants that communication to be noticed at the mailbox, not immediately thrown in the recycling. They want the communication to be read, opened, kept, shared. They want people to convert to contact that brand or that, to convert to that message. And then on the side of the receiver, when you are in the space, let's say you're at the mailbox and you're receiving something, what marketers need to remember is that their brand is not the first thing people think about as they go through their life. So we're not walking around thinking about the best car insurance. And we don't live like that, right? So when you're entering somebody's awareness, starting with context a little bit, starting with an image that describes, for example, this is about auto insurance, like a visual that connects me to that, as opposed to, bouncy castles, I don't know. So bring me into the world of what you're trying to say very quickly with imagery, and the feel of the actual material of the paper really matters. If the offers of lower investment, so for example, save $3 this weekend on a burger, you want to use a particular type of stock paper, like a thinner stock paper. If the offer is for $500 off a cruise or a vacation, you want to use a thicker stock paper. So the level of investment really matters in conveying the value of the product and the quality of the product, that perceived quality of the product, right, in the person's mind. And so essentially what was found in that research was that print media in general has a bigger footprint in the brain, in the sense that when somebody's holding a communication in their hand, a different evaluation process is happening than when they're seeing it on screen. You have no distractions, you have no pop-ups, right? So you're reading only what you're holding. There's no other open windows, so to speak. So you have the opportunity to, you get people's attention. Once they start, they're more likely to continue reading it. The physicality of it, like I said, translates to the user, to the reader, that this is a particular value. You know, this message holds weight, literally in paper weight, right? So you feel that in your hands. And that prepares the person for the experience, if it's going to be a high-end experience or not. And it takes less effort to understand. We found that when we measure a metric called cognitive workload, essentially the brain finds it a lot easier to understand the message, to find and to understand the message. So what you want essentially in a communication, whether print or digital, is you want the communication to be easy to understand, because our brains are created to avoid difficulty. We choose the path of least resistance. So if you make something that is simple, the next challenge is to make it motivating, to make it persuasive in some way. Maybe it's funny, maybe it's interesting, maybe it's really relevant. But when those things align, really motivating and easy to understand is really where you see higher conversion rates. And just direct mail has more of an advantage because of the physicality of it, that that's very hard to duplicate in the digital realm unless you use something like haptic effects or something like that.
That's fascinating. And I think there is a lot to think about for event planners. And I've got a couple of final questions, like a speed round. What, in your opinion, is one behavioral science or neuroscience or psychology insight that event professionals should apply immediately?
Definitely put yourself in the attendee's shoes from the beginning to the end of the interaction with follow-ups and everything else. Think about the smallest details and think about the senses, right? Think about a person coming from the airport in a taxi, coming to the hotel. How does the hotel feel? How does it smell? Is it too loud? Is it too busy? Do they get their room quickly? All these, put yourself in their shoes as if you are living the attendee life, right? And consider what in that journey, what can you add, right? To make it a little bit more delightful, and what friction can you remove? Can you add a little surprise, something that, hey, we know you're tired. Here's, I don't know, some chocolate or whatever you want to, just little points where you can kind of add a little bit of something. It'll be a moment of surprise and it'll delight. And then remove points of friction, making it easy to make sure that all the details are well planned out so that there's no confusion and people don't end up at the wrong location and people are not left out if there's groups going to dinner or those kinds of details, right?
This is an excellent advice. What are your top 3 neuromarketing books or resources that people from outside the field should read?
I would honestly start with a classic. It's called Influence by Robert Cialdini. He talks about the 6 principles of persuasion, and those are really the kind of core techniques or things you want to start thinking about. So that's Influence is one of my favorite. There's another one called Brainfluence, like influence, but Brainfluence. And that,
that
one
Dooley,
is really cool,
right?
because it's got very quick, easy to digest examples. So it's easy to read and it just gives you ideas with, great speed, and it's very easy to access. And there's a new one that came out. It's called Smart Persuasion. And it really talks about cognitive biases and how those shape consumer behavior. So, but that's one that I wanted to get my hands on to read next. It's a fairly new one.
Thank you. Those are great recommendations. And my final question is, the podcast title is What If I Told You? So can you complete the sentence with one takeaway from our conversation? What if I told you
that people are human beings and not targets or metrics or numbers, right? Think about the biology as much as you think about the technology you're going to use, but really start with an understanding of the human animal that you're trying to entertain, delight, inform, educate. And when you tap in that humanity component, this is what everybody's thirsty for, especially these days, I think you stand to have a much better event.
This is excellent. Thank you so much, Diana. I do appreciate all the insights, and I do encourage everyone to connect with Diana on LinkedIn, Twitter, and I will put the links in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in to What If I Told You, the Event Psychology podcast. And I encourage everyone to join the Event Psychology Club, where I share a lot of research findings, practical tips, and episodes recaps as well. Thank you again, and until next time, bye-bye.